is too general a term, because, and from my point of view, I think policing is key to the peace process. It's a critical part of the peace process. And maybe in Coney Island and places like that, it isn't as key, but this is about loyalist and Republican areas. That is the ground, in my view, that has to be won before you can even start doing normal policing. Those areas have to be reclaimed. And when you're doing surveys in those areas, I think you're asking questions like, you know, cooperation, reporting, hostility levels, you know, relevance levels, you know, all of those, you know, I think you reduce confidence on the another 10 headings and question that and see where we get. Because if we're looking at a community, and I'm talking about loyalist and Republican communities that have been alienated from policing for maybe 30 or 40 years, in fact people that have been out with guns shooting at policing for 30 or 40 years, then we need to know the scale of the problem we're facing, because we are facing in the probably one of the toughest, most negative situations a policing service could face into. And we have to have an idea of how long it's going to take. And we also have to have an idea of just how sophisticated the strategy to turn a negative into a positive has to be. So I think that, you know, I'm right with you, but the levels of research that we have to put into this, I think are far, far greater than we anticipate at this point. And, you know, you also have to, if you're on the Shankill Road saying, you know, how alienated do you feel from policing? And people say 100%, you have to say why. And then we start to drill down to the whys. And when we get to the whys, then we know the job of work that Alan and people like that have to do. I'll give you an anecdote. I launched the Human Rights Report in Derry in McGee College 2 or 3 Fridays ago. I actually spoke off the platform about the importance of human rights compliance. And I was actually making the point that even if a police officer catches somebody in the midst of a crime, breaking the law, in a violent way even, that person's human rights aren't suspended because they're breaking the law. They have to be treated with human rights. And I think a lot of police and a lot of people in the community don't actually get that. Your human rights don't get suspended just because you break the law. You're still a human being with rights who has made a mistake. And if there wasn't people making mistakes, then we wouldn't need a policing service. So now, I actually walked from McGee College in Derry down to my office in Great James Street and got stopped by a guy who's a friend of mine who got out of the car and said, I've just been stopped at PSNI on Waterloo Street, and this cheeky git searched my front pockets with his own hands. And when I told him I have a friend in the policing board and I'm going to report this, he says, you report it to whoever you like. Now, that is my lived experience, and for people who live in the Bogside and Craigan area of Derry, I think a survey in there would elicit some more anecdotes. The counter side of that is, I have a 32-year-old son who has lived his entire life as a Republican and has been part of a Republican generation, and he comes at this very sceptically. He intervened one night in the Strand Road outside a cinema where 3 cops were actually manhandling a guy who was drunk. My son doesn't drink. And he intervened and said, you know, you don't need to back off him, he's just drunk. And the guy threatened him that he would get arrested if he didn't clear off. It became an ombudsman's report, and in fairness to Steve Martin, he reported it when he seen the CCTV. So my son comes at this very sceptically. He tells me yesterday he's just had his second very positive experience with policing. And he had an experience with a police officer yesterday morning, and he says, if they were like that all the time, he says, there wouldn't be a problem. And he says, me and Neville's now the best of friends. So, I mean, a positive experience like that can turn things right around. This is a young fella who comes very sceptical. So, I just think that the key areas are Republican loyalists. That's where we start the confidence building, and I think that you drill down. There needs to be a bit more scientific research. Sorry for going through.
I would agree with your conditions that you put in the conflict, because I think if you've got major problems on areas, crime and disorder, fear of crime is still massive, and neighbourhoods still back to them. And I think there is, if the community's not satisfied with the level of policing they're getting, you're not going to build conflict in it either. But I think when we're talking about policing in the communities, I think what should be, there was an awful lot of work done with the NIPB, which I'm involved with, and getting problem solving in areas, looking at, you know, crime and disorder and fear of crime. And I think we can have to still keep working hard with, packed forums and developing major partnerships. Sometimes the police run and they get the blame for absolutely everything in an area, when half time, is maybe a third of the things that they can actually deal with. So I think we have to get down to nitty-gritty again, get down on the ground level. There should be partnership work, and they should be bringing the community in to be involved and be empowered and take ownership of their issues in their area and be part of the solution. And I think my biggest fear at the minute, not fear of crime, but my biggest fear at the minute is this man's talking about the police closures. I come from a rural area, I know that the fear of crime is going to escalate when they feel that there's no police presence there. The neighbourhood police team there at the minute, they're involved in community projects, they're involved in community forums. I think we're going to lose all that. I think we're going to take a major step backwards when a lot of these police stations are closed in the rural areas, and that's my worry.
Right, so I just suppose maybe to tie a few different points together, and I think Brendan was absolutely right that the community have a vital part in this as well. And one of the things I didn't say at the top for the sake of brevity, so didn't want to go on too long. I mean, this notion of confidence is laying, pretty much in the hands of the policing institutions and the politicians for the last 10 years. The community have in no way owned that. So as part of that, there also is this bigger confidence, or whatever we're going to call it, whatever we're going to do. There has to be some sort of programme from the policing institutions about community education about policing. Again, as Gerard said there, a lot of people just don't know what the police should or should not be doing. And, there's no such thing as, especially in Northern Ireland, as neutrality to policing. Here people are coming from different experiences and traditions. So I think there has to be another spoke of this wheel. And again, it sort of seems to build up and up the level of work and research, but some sort of community-based education about what the police are, what they do, because that is another part of the problem which detracts from confidence when the police certainly cannot put more officers in the ground that are constrained because of whatever sorts of reasons, but they just have no idea that that's the underlying reason. So why are we not telling them that? It's just nowhere. Beyond my criminology students and the university, there's very few people have any sort of policing knowledge or education out there in Northern Ireland.
Sorry, just picking up a couple of points with Brian and Gerard made. If we take this completely out of context of Northern Ireland, if you like, lose all the historical paramilitary sort of issues, which are an important part, obviously. But if you did that and took it to an urban setting in Liverpool or in Nottingham or Newcastle or wherever, would it not be true to say that many of the same issues in the police not being seen as acceptable within those communities, particularly estates and so forth, shall we say, would that not be true? And is there not a danger that when we talk in these sort of contexts, that too much emphasis is put on those who say they have no confidence in the police within the loyal Republican communities, and how much of that is almost, I don't want to be offensive, but it's almost like by choice that that they don't want to be involved with the police, that there are people within those communities, shall we say, who are very happy that the police aren't seen as acceptable within the community because of the Trump their style. And would that not be the case in an English or Scottish context, even aside, if you like, the political baggage from Northern Ireland?
Absolutely. I mean, there are very similar patterns of engagement and disengagement with the police in all cities, UK, Europe, all over the world, America. So we can never really get to the bottom of that. I mean, certainly some of the, I can't remember the name of the police academic, but they said that the best the police can ever expect to attain is the consent of the public to do their job, and there will always be people who fall outside that. So we just have to work with what they have, and certainly can't comment on what they do in England and Wales in terms of this sort of notion of confidence. But I think it's just something we have to keep working at, and as I said today, just in a slightly more or much more sophisticated means from the evidence we have in front of us.
I think we've, sorry, a few more, okay. Kevin and then David.
John, agree with everything you've said there. I think there's two major factors that are the elephants in the room around what we do here, which is alcohol and mental health issues in the community. I think having worked with colleagues in DOJ around the community safety strategy, and also there's a reducing offending strategy coming out of consultation in the next few years, next few weeks. Those are the two massive inputs. And the couldn't agree more with Brendan McGuigan there when he mentioned the wider criminal justice. A good example of which last week was the joyriders they caught, the car hijackers they caught red-handed, and they were bailed 3 or 4 hours later. And then you hear various politicians all say this shouldn't happen. There's a good example where what's said in the media could reflect upon confidence levels in the police.
I'm just really digging down to one or two of the points made in your presentation.
Sorry, just could you speak up there? David,
Yeah,
please,
sorry.
or James A.
On your slide, which has the key influences on perceptions of confidence in police, are those 3 points common? Are they Northern Ireland specific? And where do those 3 come from specifically? And is it confidence in the police or confidence in policing that they're the key influences on?
Those points came specifically from the Wesley Scobin study, and I appreciate it as one study of many, but that was a meta study of, it was a very extraordinarily comprehensive study of a range of these factors, and one of the few major studies that's actually looked at, and these across a range of international pieces of research are the 3 dominant factors which came out, and I have no doubt they could vary from place to place, and some people disagree or agree with them, but in general those came out as the key issues. And again, difference between police and policing. The Wesley Scobin study predominantly concentrated upon contacts with the police as an organisation, which is again something which has all parallels with in the talk today, which is here we are so fixated on the police to do everything, which is a sort of a box that we actually need to get out of, both politically, from publicly. We definitely need that shift. So hopefully that answers those. Certainly can have a chat with you or get you a copy of that without problem.
I think we're just time for one more. You have another chance, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. No, it's just an observation really about the reducing offending strategy and the community safety strategy and the number of other strategies that exist out there in the world of statutory bodies, and the fact that a lot of them actually bear no resemblance to each other. So we've got a reducing offending strategy coming out from the DOJ very soon. Community safety strategy will also come out, but it will be a separate document. You've joined together the DPP and the CSP into the PCSP, but does it really have its own identity? Is there any attempt to join the policing plan and the community safety strategy together so it actually delivers something slightly different? It doesn't just do the statutory holding the police to account, and it just doesn't do the partnership working with the CSP. Will all the partners be held to account by each other? So the housing executive and the health authorities and so on and so forth.
Well, certainly will not treading Aidan's toes with the community safety strategy coming out, but I know certainly within the PCSPs there will be the separate policing committee, which will essentially replicate the DPP function, and as far as I'm aware there will be agreement between the policing plan and the DOJ community safety objectives, so hopefully that will be a focal point of getting things right at a local level. But how that pans out remains to be seen. Certainly I'm aware that the first year will be wait and see, and if it needs tweaked, it needs tweaked. So
I think it certainly does offer that opportunity, because it'll be the first time that you've got the statutory, the broader statutory agencies part of the PSNI in the room with the independents and with the local politicians, the local councillors, and in addition to the policing committee, there will be the delivery committees as well. So I do think it offers that possibility, but it does mean that I suppose people will have to pull their sovereignty away and actually agree corporate objectives for their PCSPs, which are cross-cutting. Can I finish by asking you a question, because you've taken us away from, I suppose, the kind of generic, comprehensive type of population survey, and you've said that you've been moving from confidence to satisfaction and trying to reach out a bit deeper. But I thought you were almost coming from where you're coming from, which was actually statistics are not going to answer this at the end of the day, and there is a role for that to be supplemented, so there always is with qualitative approaches and case study work and so on. And I just wonder how you see that kind of economy develop in terms of the qualitative and quantitative approaches.
Well, certainly, I mean, at least in the quantitative statistics side, it's just something we haven't got right, and of course no statistics will ever be a complete account of any picture of anything, but if we have that as our starting point, then we can at least direct in the current climate resources, prioritise into particular sorts of areas and sorts of activities, because I don't think we should wander off and do sort of quality bits of case study, because inevitably with policing in Northern Ireland generally, there's always contest and disagreement and people to say, no, that study is not representative. So I think we need to, I suppose, anything to take away from today is to create some sort of fundamental basis to go forward with the 2020 of the community, so the new community safety strategy. So it's only when we have that will we stop, quibbling in the corner, on the politics and the conjecture and who's right and who's wrong. Then we actually have something to work from, and from that, then we have the opportunity to do other sorts of research. But at the minute, we just don't have any sort of fundamental basis from which to work from, and that just leads to separation, fragmentation of our knowledge of policing, and that's certainly something which I see as the focus for the next policymakers for the next 5-10 years.
With that, can I thank you, John, for a very interesting presentation and for dealing comprehensively with that range of questions. I'm sure some of them you have anticipated, perhaps some of them not. I think it does underline the kind of the challenge for all of us going forward in terms of this whole very, very important area, a very critical area for the policing board. I think competence in policing and different dimensions of that is probably the most important thing that we struggle with in the board. I think you've given us some leads and in a sense given us challenges as well in terms of how to go forward with that. And I believe there's possibilities for working with yourselves and other academics. But I think also, as we've stressed several times this afternoon, with other parties to the issue as well. And it's not all about the police and policing, but really it's about trying to marshal a range of volunteers and statutory bodies together to be part of this enterprise. So thank you very much. We've given you the feedback sheets. We'd be grateful if you would complete those and drop them in. There's probably a box in the back there for them. So could we thank John in the usual way now?